Every summer, my mother would take me to visit our relatives who lived out in the country. My cousin and I were almost the same age and were always up to mischief. We spent our days out in the fields exploring the area, making bows and arrows, sharpening knives, throwing rocks, climbing trees, and tracking wild animals. One day we set out on a long walk across the fields, not really having any idea where we were going. Sometimes we like to get ourselves lost and then try to find our way home. After a few hours of walking, it was getting late in the afternoon when we came across a farmhouse that looked as if it was abandoned. On the property there was a small storage shed, so we jumped over the fence and decided to find out what was inside. We found that the doors were locked. There was a small keyhole, but we couldn't see through it because it was blocked by dust and thick spider webs. We walked towards the house and noticed that the front door was standing open, but there was no sign of life coming from within. The yard was overgrown with grass and weeds. The only sound we could hear was an old windmill nearby, rattling in the breeze. I went to the door of the house and shouted, "Hello," but there was no answer. It was then that the smell hit me. It was the stench of damp mold and decay. I stepped inside. There were clothes and papers everywhere, and some cardboard boxes. There was also an old bed, some racks of moth-eaten clothes, and a leather armchair. I took a few steps forward and the smell seemed to get worse. A feeling of intense uneasiness washed over me and I wanted to turn and run away. Just then, something caught my eye. At the foot of the bed between some boxes lay a head. It was covered in gray hair. There was an old man lying on his back, his face turned upwards and his eyes open. He was dead. I let out a horrible yell, then grabbed my cousin by the arm and we both ran as fast as we could. As we fled across the yard, we were passing the shed outside when the locked door suddenly crashed open and an old lady was standing there. Her hair was in disarray and when she smiled, her lips parted, revealing a row of rotten teeth. She was carrying a bloody knife in her hand. She made an attempt to grab me as we rushed past, but I managed to dodge her and kept running. I didn't dare to look back. I just ran and ran as fast as I could. It was a few minutes later that I realized my cousin wasn't with me. I stopped in my tracks, breathing heavily, and looked around. He was nowhere to be seen. My heart sank. I started running again, desperately trying to get back to my aunt and uncle's house as quickly as possible. Eventually, I saw the lights of their house in the distance. As soon as I reached home, I ran inside and called out to my mother. My relatives gathered around me and I started babbling and begging them to go find my cousin. My uncle got in his truck and brought me with him. Eventually, we found the old farmhouse, but my cousin wasn't there. Neither were the old man or the old woman. After searching for a while, my uncle called the police. A few days later, my cousin still had not been found. The farm was searched from top to bottom, but there was no trace of him, and he remains missing to this day. It's one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in this region. I don't know what happened to my cousin that day, but I'm glad it didn't happen to me. On an early dim morning, an elderly woman rested her hand atop a gravestone. The gravestone read Henry Blackwood, 1938 to 2004. She rested flowers on it and wept, something she didn't usually do. She always made sure to bring something of Henry's when she made her annual visit to his grave. Her memory wasn't what it used to be and her brain needed help to get it jogged. She brought something he hated, his hearing aids. She remembered how he never used them, always insisting how he had excellent hearing, despite keeping the television's volume up so high. Now all she wanted was his return to her loving embrace. "Oh, Henry," she said, falling to her knees and looking to the sky. "How I wish you'd come back to me." Up in the sky and through her blurred, teary vision, she saw a red star. It was faint, but she heard a malignant chuckle, and the star flashed to match it. Then it disappeared with the rising sun. She wiped away her tears. Strange. Was it a product of her imagination? She stood up and surveyed the area, but saw nothing. It seemed like the moment was merely nothing but old, senile, womanly mood swings. As she smiled at her silly old self, a question came to her that felt like part of a dark realization. Could the battery in the hearing aid still work? She attached it to her best ear and turned it on. She could hear the rustling of crow feathers in a nearby tree. It probably still worked due to her husband's lack of commitment to use it. Then, swallowing hard, she rested her ear on the ground above his grave. Her mouth dropped in horror as she heard scratching, shuffling, and a familiar voice bellowing a horrific scream. "I love you so dearly, so warming and bright. You give such joy that lasts me through the night. Your smiling face, always so true. Don't you see? I love you. Of all the girls I've come to love, you beyond them soar infinitely above. Your eyes do so shimmer to lighten up my life. I love you so dearly throughout any strife. Although you no longer see me, I'm sure you feel me around, even though for a while I've been deep in the ground. That one bad night when we were cold and lost, I held you so tightly to ward off the frost. I can't believe you did this, not in my wildest nightmare. Never, because you had said you'd love me forever. You lied to me, my dear, and that is a true pain. Now pay attention to the sound of the rain. But don't let it get to you. Just rest now, fall asleep. For in the morning, your lover shall weep. I'd say I love you, but with your blood there will be art. Time to be afraid. I'm coming for your heart." If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. If you'd like to, you can follow me at Twitter. The handle is @FuzzyPantaloons, and I'll see you all next time.